Okay, so let me log in here in DevBox. Just a second. I don't know why it is asking me an authenticator. Well, I had to configure in my Microsoft Authenticator, so the code this time. Okay. 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 Perfect. Okay, so let's start with this story that we have about KPIs. This story here is about creating a Lightning component that will be tracking the time spent by agents when working on cases. So the description of the story is pretty long, but we can summarize it and see how it is working as we go during the meeting, because I already implemented all these requirements. So I will show you in this moment how it works to have an idea. Okay, so the Lightning Web component is requested to be added here in the Lightning detail page of the case, and it is requested to be hidden, so the component's user interface won't appear initially until it is configured to appear inside the component. So just for us to have like a better understanding about the component, I will edit momentarily this page so we can see how the component is working. Okay, so let's click here and edit this page, and let's wait for Salesforce to load. Just a second. Wow, Salesforce sometimes is like slower than other times. Okay, okay. So the component I think is this one, which appears to not having a user interface. This one's case time tracker. For this component, it was not a requirement, but I added here a configuration attribute here to show or hide the component's UI. I think that this would be really helpful for QA team to test it, and I really implemented a basic user interface for it. So I just wanted to leverage the user interface that I created and don't waste it. So I just added here this attribute in which we can hide and show the component. So let's click on save. And now that is the changes are saved, we can go back to the details of the case. Okay. Okay, so to start with the KPI topics, then let's start exploring this story. So this is the case timer. Basically, what it does is that it will record the amount of seconds that have passed between the user opening a case and then the user doing one of these two activities. One possibility would be that the user changes the status of the case, and the second possibility would be that the user changes the owner of this case, or an automation or an API running in the background changes the status of this case or changes the owner of this case. Whatever of these possibilities, if they happen, then the case timer component will save the amount of seconds that have passed until that point in time and store it in behalf of this user that is the one that is watching the case in this moment. So that's basically what it does. So to start with, when we click here on show sessions, I was working on this case record to do like many tests when I was developing this story. So we can see that now in my place, it is September 7th, 11:15 minutes. So the session started here, and the duration says that we have 0 seconds. So always when we open the case or we reload this page, a new session, a new session time record like this one will be stored, and the event will be session started, and it will always have a duration of 0 seconds because we are not interested saving the duration for this initial event. We are interested in saving the duration of the other events when the status changes or when the owner is changed. Okay, so in this moment we have 1 minute 58, 59 seconds. So if I change the status of this case to, let's say, pending, 2 minutes 12, 13, 14. Sometimes it can take a bit of time to completely save. So now we can
Is
see
this
that the case
delay,
timer.
sorry Juan, the delay that we noticed, is it caused by this case timer or there's some other processing going on? Because that delay is quite large.
Yes, I'm not totally sure. I'm before I added the component, I also experienced these short delays, or well, delays in fact, because they are kind of a bit long. So I suspect that it's not because of the component. Maybe it could be because of other components, but I'm totally sure that I experienced this delay before adding the component. Maybe we later can do a test removing the component and saving, and we can see the same delay. Yeah, it's something that we I think that we should take a look at. Yeah. Okay. So we saw that we had like 2 minutes 15 seconds, and if we transform this into only seconds, we will have a duration of 137 seconds, and the event will be stored as status change, because that's exactly what happened. Okay, let me zoom in just a second, just a bit more. And that's what it will be doing. If during the same session, I mean, the user hasn't closed this case tab, during the same session, the user performs another change. Let's change the owner. Let's simulate that an API is changing the owner, or the user itself is changing the owner. Let's change this to, I don't know, what's the current owner, because if the owner is exactly the same, it won't work. Just let me check what's the current owner. Owner says owner ID. Okay. Okay, owner is myself. So let's change the owner to Gabriel, for example, and then submit. And we have 1 minute 59, 2 minutes, 2 minutes 1. Okay. So we can see that the case timer again have reset. And when we click on show sessions, we will see that the seconds that have passed between the status change and the owner change are added to the same session time record that we have here. So that was a requirement for not having to save different session times for each different change, but only one duration, one second duration amount for all of the changes that the user is currently doing during the current session. And we define current session as not closing the tab in which the case is. Okay, so I think that's clear. So that's what this case timer is doing basically. Um, it is storing the records here in session times, as I said. Here in this table, we can open each of these ones. So we have a couple of fields here in this object. This object is obviously a custom object, and we can see that it has like very few fields, but I think that it's important to check it quickly. So we have here the name of the session time, the case, and the parent case, the agent or user that performed the action, the duration in seconds, the event. This event will be the last event that happened during that session. So we can change the status, then change the owner, then change the status again, change the owner, change the owner. It won't matter. It won't only record what was the last change that we did during that session. And according to this, if the owner has been changed, then we can store here the old value and new values here. Just to have like a quick overview of the change. I know that we can do this as well with case history, but I thought that it was a good idea to have like the old value and new values here just handy. So we can have that here. If the change is a status change, let's change the status. Let's say here. Let's change the status back to on hold. Let's click on save. And here is asking me the on hold duration. Let's click on save. Okay, so we have here now different duration, and when we open the same record, we will see that this time it will be showing that the change was status change, and we will see the what was the old status and the new status. Okay. Okay, status change, and we could see old value pending, new value on hold for this session. So that's basically what the component is doing. And those are basically like all of the requirements. I've tested this also with automations, like um, um, implementing or testing with a flow that is updating this from a different window, and it also catches the change. The thing is that I did that test on my Trailhead program, so I don't have the flow or the button that I used to trigger the flow here. But it's working. I've tested it, and now these changes are ready to be tested in partial. I think that the deployment is to be made like in a couple of hours. So yes, this will be moved to partial. And that's basically everything for this story. So yes, that was everything for this story about the KPIs. Don't know, guys, if maybe you have any questions.
Is it some app or from App Exchange, or everything is custom from our side?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, initially we thought about installing App Exchange app, but the thing is that I was checking the the functionality that this package offered. In fact, it was a package offered by Salesforce Lab, so it was pretty like secure to add it and like kind of official from Salesforce. But the feature didn't like work quite well for all requirements, because to start with, it was saving like different session time records for each change, and the requirement was like very clear for not doing that. Instead, saving one uh, session time every time that a change is done inside the same session. So the behavior was completely different, and it was storing also the amount of um, hours, minutes, and seconds, and we were only interested in the amount of seconds, and it had like a lot of code that wasn't really necessary for our use case. So what I did was that instead of installing the managed package, I just created a custom component, and I just implemented the parts of the code that we needed, like for example this interface and the timer and all of that. But yes, I thought that it was uh, easier, a lot easier to not install the full package, but just taking some parts that we really need and adapt the rest to our requirements. So yeah, that's what I did.
Okay, can you show us that implementation? Like, can we do the code review of this?
Sure thing. Okay. Well, I'm here recording, and that makes it a bit hard for me to access Visual Studio Code. Just 1 second. Okay, it's my Visual Studio Code. Okay. So I think that this would be easier to understand if we start with the component. Let's start maybe with a quick review of the HTML. We basically have a big LWC if to know if we should display the user interface or not. And here we have the container, and inside these two divs we have the clock basically, and here we have the model between these lines 31 and 51, in which we are displaying the model when we click on the button. So we are displaying it as well, obviously conditionally. Okay,
Can
that's
you
for this.
please,
Yep.
like in your comment of this code, can you add the link to that GitHub repo where you took it from? Because you cloned a lot of it from the repo, right?
Yes, well, it In fact, I cloned like very little, but yes, I cloned a couple of parts. Yeah.
Yeah, just so that we have a reference, because I don't know even
Uh-huh.
where to look for it. So that if we can look, at the original package somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Sure, sure,
Just
sure. No
throw a
problem.
link like in the description or something.
Mm-hmm. Sure, sure, of course. Yes, in the description. Sorry, that's it. Okay. Well, that's for the HTML, pretty basic. JavaScript. Here on JavaScript, we start seeing that we have some columns attributes that we will implement it or use it in the data table component that appears inside the the model. Let me zoom in here. This just a bit because I let me just zoom in a bit. Editor font zoom in. Editor zoom. Editor zoom in. Okay.
I can see it's fine.
Perfect. Okay, well, we have this wire method here that basically is taking the data of the current case. So we pass here the record ID and the fields that we are interested in this case, status and owner, because those are the two triggers, the two only triggers for the session times to be recorded. We have as well another wired function here to receive the session times every time that a new session time is stored or saved in the database. We receive it here using the wired adapter. In the connected callback, we have a method to start the stopwatch, and also we are calling here an Apex method that we can see in this moment just to understand it. To insert the initial session time on start. So I created a separated method for that, and I'm sending the ID of this case here as parameter. And this method, to have the whole picture of it, is this one. It's pretty basic. Okay, this is the test method. Sorry, this one. This one. So I'm passing here I send it here the case ID. I implemented also the bypass framework for this. So basically, if the bypass is active, we can see how this variable gets its value here from this static block. It will return, and if the bypass is not active, then it will continue. So it will here create a new session time, add all of the attributes, and return it. First insert it, and then return its ID here. To the component. So that's basically what this part here on line 100 of the JavaScript is doing. Okay. So then for the disconnected callback, I have two clear intervals. We only have two intervals. One is the interval that helps us to give or have the counting of the seconds for the clock. And the second interval is basically the one that is polling constantly for changes to the case. And I had to implement really like similar behavior than we implemented for the traffic light component, because we also required to store the seconds when an API event or change from a flow or automation was changing the status and the owner. So I had to implement a similar structure here for constantly polling for changes. It is polling for changes every 2 seconds. Okay, we can review that in a couple of seconds more in depth. Okay, this method here, process data, it is called when we receive new data from the case. So if the case has updated, then it processes the data and it again starts polling for changes. So two things. This one is executed every time that we receive new data from the case, but this one not, because it is only executed once, and I have a control that tells me when this has already been executed for not having to execute the interval function every time we receive new data to the case. Only the first one, and if it detects that it's more than the first time, then it won't execute the polling again. Okay. Maybe it can make more sense when we go back to when we go down. Sorry, to that method. Okay. Process data. So process data is kind of the main method here. Basically, what it does is just creating a wrapper that contains all of the data that we need to insert or upsert for the session time. So initially we insert a new session time, and if the session time already exists and this session hasn't finished yet, then what we do is just observe the same session time, right? So if we go here to the case time tracker controller class, we can go down and here we will find a wrapper, and this wrapper is the one that I'm building from the JavaScript. So it contains the case ID, the session time ID, in case that it really exists. What's the operation? What's the amount of seconds? The owner new value, owner old value, status new value, status of value. So basically, what we're doing is building one wrapper object of this kind, and then we pass it as parameter to this method here. So we say session time wrapper, it's the parameter, and this is the parameter that we are sending in this method. So all of the next lines, what they are doing is just building that wrapper object, and finally sending it here to this Apex method, right? To the Apex method that will finally insert it and handle it. Okay, so maybe we can take a deeper look at these lines, because there are many things that they're important to understand. So basically, we start this here, getting all of the variables that we need, the case info. We start the session time object, the current owner, the current status. Okay, so a requirement for this story was that if the current status is equals to solved, or the current status is equals to closed, then we return, because we won't have, or we don't want to save a session time in the case that the status was changed to these two status specifically. So for all of the other status, it will store the session time, duration, and data. But if the status are any of these two, then it will just return and do nothing. Okay. If the case is different, then it will go here to this line 125, and it will ask, do we have an original case owner, or do we have an original case status? In the case that we don't have original case owner or original case status for the current session, then it will store it inside these corresponding variables. Okay. So if it's the first time, then it will go here, and if it is second, third, and so on, then it will not store it again. Okay, and then we go to this part in which we say else if this original case owner is different to the current owner. So basically, we are saying here if the owner has changed or the status has changed. Okay, so that's what we are doing here. If the owner or the status are changed, then identify which of both changes have really happened. Okay, if in case that the owner has changed, then it creates a session time in which the operation will be owner change, the owner new value will be current owner, the owner old value will be the original case owner. Okay, and the original case owner now, it's the new or the current owner. So it gets updated in this line to always have what's the original, what's the old owner, what's the new owner. If the change is really about the status, then create a session time with operation of a status change. The status new value will be current status of value would be original case status, and here we update the original case status to reflect the new change that we just made. Okay, so that's it for this part. In both of the cases, doesn't matter if it is owner change or status change. What we will do is always store the amount of seconds, and this amount of seconds we will get it from this variable that is called seconds total. Okay, s total, seconds total. We will see how do we get this variable in the next method. So here we have the seconds, and here we have the case ID that we're getting it from the record ID variable basically. And here, okay, and here we define if we really have created a previous session time record. If that's the case, then we set a session time ID inside our wrapper to perform an observe. And if it's not the case, then the wrapper will get to the Apex method without any session time ID. So in that case, it will perform an insert basically. That's basically what all of these lines are doing. Just understanding if we have an existing session time ID or not. If we don't have it, then insert it. If we have it, then just observe it, and that's it. Okay. That's what we're doing in this moment. And here in this line, we're just sending the wrapper to the Apex method, and we here process the result. We say the result, it will return us an ID of the session, either if it is inserted or inserted, it will always return us the ID. So we store the ID here in the session time ID always. And if we set this session time has been created equals to true. This is the same variable that we are using here to understand if we already have created a session time. Okay, so that's basically how it works. And here, after we receive the result, we click on reset. We go to reset clock values. What it does is just setting all of the seconds, minutes, and hours to 0 to track the time for the next update. And here we refresh session time records. So basically, we just poll or call again for changes of to get the changes of the new session time records to display it inside the table, inside the data table. Okay, that's it for that method basically. Let's check this other method, receive session times. So this other method is executed here when from the wire adapter, and we execute it there to receive data. So basically what I'm doing here is just going through each of the data of the session time records and adding some new attributes to it that I will need to render inside the data table. For example, the link, I'm creating here a link to the record. I'm adding here a link label. So we can see that every time we open here this, we can see that for this column, all of the values are open. So I'm adding that here. The user link also, a link to see what's the user quickly and handy. So I added here this here, and we click on the user, we can be taken to the page, to the details page of the user. And what's the user full name? So it's just the same as the username. Okay, but I'm just like simplifying the user full name here in this attribute. And then we just add the new attributes to each session time record here to this list, and then we update it in this line. And this is how we can have like a better view of the records, like adding all of that here. Okay. And well, open modal and close modal are just two functions, really basic, to show and hide the model every time we click on close or show the sessions button. Here is start stopwatch. This method, as we can remember, we are calling that method here. Start stopwatch from connected callback only. And what it is doing is checking if this has been already if this method start stopwatch and the interval has been already executed. So if I already executed this method, then I will have an interval for this function, because we are using here the set interval function, right? So I'm storing the interval ID here in this variable, main clock interval, and every time I execute this function, what I'm doing is just clearing that interval to start the interval again. Okay, so that's what I'm doing in these three lines, 200 from 202. The next line, 204, what I'm doing is just executing the interval. And here, basically what I'm doing is just a pretty basic like conditions and additions to the seconds, minutes, and hours. And here we are storing the total amount of seconds. So when we are here in the clock, we can see that it is showing us hours, minutes, and seconds. But at the end, all of these get simplified to only seconds. So that's what I'm doing in this moment. Well, that's what I'm doing in this line here, 205, storing the seconds total. So these other variables, S, M, and H, are only just for like for understanding better what amount of time has passed. But the real amount of seconds will be stored here. Okay, this is the one that really care about. These other ones are just for the interface. Okay, and we are getting to the end of the code. Here, reset clock values, just a method that sets all of these variables that were involved inside the clock to 0. That's all that it is doing. And here, refresh apex, the refresh session time records just is calling to the refresh apex standard method for Lightning Web Components to refresh a list of records that have been acquired from wire adapter. Okay, so I think that this is clear, but I think that it's just important to remember it. So refresh apex is a method that is imported from standard Lightning Web Components modules. And what it would be doing is just refreshing a variable or a list of elements that have been acquired using wired adapter. Okay, only wired adapter, not imperative apex, only wired adapter. So if we are getting here the data of the case or the data of the session times, we can refresh it just calling this function, and it will poll for new changes so that all the data is up to date every time. Okay, and here we have this function that is very important, and it's called start polling for changes. Start polling for changes, what I will be doing is calling refresh apex, but for the case information. So when we are here in the case, and as I said before, but I think that it's good to repeat it again. If we had any automation in the background, or if we are changing these values of the case, the status of the owner through a flow, or in a different window, or a different user perform that change, etc., we must check it. We must catch that change. But the only way in which we can catch it is constantly querying for new data. The good thing is that we are doing it using wire adapter. So in that way, we are not kind of using Apex. It's kind of pretty standard, so to speak, but it's the only way that we found to effectively get those changes that are performed by APIs or flows or whatever other thing that is running in the background. Okay,
That
so
was
that's what.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's that. I remember we spoke about this before, and you exhausted all the other options, right? Because we will have. I'm worried that once we have 2,000 agents and every agent starts pooling every 2 seconds, we might Salesforce might throttle us. I've seen it on other projects
Yeah.
when people, there's nothing else we can do here, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we have the two possibilities, but both of the possibilities were actually querying for new data and exhausting the limit somehow, right? We have the possibility for using this refresh apex, or the other possibility was to use platform events. But for both of the cases, we ended up basically doing the same, querying for new changes and like affecting the limits. So yeah, we agreed that this would be like the best option to proceed with, because it was for me easier, and also it wouldn't stress limits so much as using platform events. So that's why we had to proceed with this one. I know that it's not Victor, the best approach in terms of governance, governing limits, or that kind of constraints, but it was the way in which we could get those updates. So
Can you
that's
put
what
at least that number 2,000 into a custom metadata? Because if we start having problems in production, we quickly need to, change it or disable it. So I would say first thing is we need to have a quick way of disabling it altogether, which I guess we can just remove it from the page layout.
Yeah.
And second is it would be good to be able to change that pooling number.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah, I can do it. Uh, do you think maybe we could use attributes here from the page, the app builder? Maybe we can
Yeah,
use.
that should be
Yeah.
fine. Just can you quickly document it on your story? Like, yeah, I did the attributes because I'm putting together documentation on like disaster recovery or whenever there's a problem, they need a
Mhm.
quick guide on say, okay, if this happens, then I need to do that. So I'm gonna have
Oh,
to
okay.
kind of put it together. So that'll be part of it.
Oh, okay, got it. Perfect. Yeah, sure. I will add that just in like 15 minutes, and that's it.
Okay.
We will have like more control about that. So yeah, that's basically what the component is doing. And yes, I think that's it. Basically, we covered the component, we covered the methods here in the Apex class. I think that's it, guys. Yeah. Let me check if we have one or any other thing that we should cover. Um, Classes, flexi pages, layouts. Okay, I think that we don't have any other things. Maybe just to mention quickly that permissions for this component would be stored here in these permission sets. Let me just search for it. Okay, so I created a custom permission set with all of the required permissions to execute the component, but I also added the permissions to these other two permission sets as described in the story, which are view all and modify all. So I added permissions to view all session times and modify all session times. And the permissions for the Apex class, I added those permissions inside the controller, and inside all Apex permission set, all Apex classes, controller access or controller classes. I think that there's a permission set called like that, and that's it. I think that only those two permissions that have access to the class. And also we have the analytics integration profile. So here we are this point is asking to add visibility for session times to that profile directly. So I added the visibility for this profile directly, and uh, and I think that's it. I think that in my pull request in GitHub we can see all of the permission sets and profiles that I edited. So we can see there where are the classes and where are the permissions to see the sessions. So yeah, yep. I think that's it. That's it from my side. Don't know if maybe there are any questions.
Good, Victor.
Mm, you said that there is always one session record for a case, yeah, but you open the pop-up, there are a lot of records. Or I'm missing
Oh yeah,
something.
yes, yeah, yes. Because every time that I open this case or I reload the page, it means that a new session has started. So for example, if I close this and I open again the case, the same case, then it counts as a new session, and all of the changes made inside that session should be stored separately from the other sessions. So that's how the behavior was requested. Okay, so we can see here that we have a new session started at this moment, 11:48 my time, 11:48, 49, and it's a duration of 0 seconds. And from here, from this point in time, then the new seconds will be stored in a separated session time record. Okay. Yep.
So you mean it don't know, per business requirements, it doesn't like store information. mm,
Yeah,
how
we
long
all of that.
how long this case was opened? If you refresh it again, the previous timer just reset and no records about it.
Yeah. But because I refreshed the case and I didn't perform any changes on this, neither on the status nor on the owner. Okay, so if I have this tab open for the case and I haven't made any changes to the owner or the status, then no time should be locked. Okay, no time should be stored. But if I take, like, let's say 20 minutes with this tab opened, and finally I do a change to the status or the owner, only on that until that point in time, the those 20 minutes will be stored. Okay, so that's how the component was requested to work. Here in these points, for this all of these scenarios, we can have like a clear understanding with examples about when to lock handle time and when to not store any handle time. So yes, all of
So
that
it
is
only
explained here.
only stores information when case was open and status is changed or owner is changed. If you do nothing, it stores nothing. I mean,
Exactly.
if you do not change owner or
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's working at design. And that's exactly the logic that were pretty different from the standard component, from the component from the app exchange. So since the logic was pretty like totally different, I just opted for just taking some of the small parts of the component and creating all of the logic brand new, because it was pretty different from the component. So yeah, that's what is happening. Oh yes, you're right. You're right. That's exactly how it should work.
okay. And if, for example, you open the case, timer started, and then somebody else is changing the owner. So
Then in that
I'm
case,
not sure from business perspective how this information is useful. So what does it mean? It, like, I see here 3 minutes, but somebody else he also opens the case, right?
Yeah,
So it can
yeah,
be a
in that,
background process.
yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
that can close the case. What the sense of such a data?
When that happens, two things. The first one is that it requires the one of the users to reload the page with, because it detects that one change was made by other people or by other person to the same record that another person is watching. So in that case, Salesforce requires to reload, or I know that a pop-up appears here saying there are some changes or something like that, and it reloads. And the second thing is that we have here the lookup to the user, and this lookup tells us which user performed which action in which date and which amount of seconds for the change. Okay, so we have here separated all of the session time, so it's safe for different users to be making changes to the same case. And it won't have any problems. Okay,
Is there
does that make sense?
some like cleanup job for these records? Because maybe if you have a lot of agents, a lot of cases, there will be a lot
Yeah,
of related session
it would.
records in
Mhm.
future.
It will
No?
be starting to store a lot of records, especially because every time as a case is opened, at least one record will be stored. The one that says session started, session started, session started, session started, and we can see this in this moment. You're right, Victor. We are seeing here that we have many session started records and 0 seconds. So yeah, I think that obviously is out of the scope for this story, but yes, it would be like helpful maybe to like ask Epic if they are planning to do something with these records or with the records that really don't have any duration, right? So yes, that's a good point. Yeah, thank you, Victor. I think that we should take a look at that. Okay. So yes, guys. Well, I don't know if any other questions, maybe.
I think we're good.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Perfect. So yes, that's basically the explanation about this story and all the component logic and code. And that was the only story that I have about KPIs. I don't have like